another 30 seconds and we'll get started here. So last chance to get your coffee, get your water, or whatever it is that you're drinking this morning, and we'll get going. Very cute, Dave McCloskey, very cute. Solo today, buddy, solo. All right, let's get started here. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning on our webinar. Yes, I am solo today, Dave. There's no Steve Darling with me today. I'm going big time. Anyways, thanks for coming out to the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce webinar. We've been doing about 20 of these over the past 6 weeks on all sorts of different topics, and it's been very informative, and thanks for all your feedback, and please keep it coming. Today we are very lucky to have a couple of people from Service Canada with us. All the changes that are going on with all sorts of things, with all the programs that have been announced, Service Canada is at the forefront of delivering these programs. They are not the policy makers. Let's make that clear right off the bat. They do not make the rules. They are there to try to administer the program for the politicians and for the, they've been doing a great job. And as I've said all along, I'll repeat it again, they've been under an extreme amount of pressure, and I've been very impressed by the job the civil service is doing, because the politicians will announce something for all the right reasons, and then it's up to the civil service to figure out how to deliver it and how to get it out to the public. And there's always a lag time, and they've been doing a remarkable job delivering this stuff very quickly. So congratulations and thank you to all of them for all their help. So without any further ado, we're gonna get started. We've got Diane and Leon from Service Canada here to talk about a whole bunch of different programs that are out there. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. That's the best way to do this. We're not gonna be taking live questions. Put them in the chat. I'll ask the questions at the end of the program, and we'll get going there. So we've got a PowerPoint where I think we're going to start with Diane. Some people are still in the waiting room there. We'll give it another 10 seconds here. Steph, got the nod from Steph. We're good to go. Yeah, so put your questions in the chat down at the bottom there. Quick chat. Put your questions there. If you're on Facebook, ask the questions on Facebook, and Steph will get them to me. And at the end of the presentation, we'll ask Diane and Leon all the questions that haven't been answered, but I've got a feeling they're going to answer a lot of your questions during the presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn over to Diane to get started. Diane, take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Tri-Cities Chamber, for inviting us to come and talk to everybody today. And we will get started. So Leon and I are with the, we're citizen services specialists, and we're with the community outreach and liaison team. There's 4 of us that work on the Lower Mainland, and our area is all the way from Boston Bar up to Pemberton and over to the Sunshine Coast. And our role is to get out into the community and make sure that everybody is aware of the benefits that are out there. So we work a lot with seniors, we work a lot with Indigenous communities, we're active on the downtown east side with different organizations helping vulnerable people. And it's really great that we've been able to connect with the chambers during this crisis and be able to give you some information as well. Our role since the crisis has been mainly liaison services, dealing with a lot of our service delivery partners and answering questions, but also we've started doing presentations like this for social workers in hospitals, and RBC has asked us to do some, and the Tri-Cities Chamber to get out there and give information about employment insurance and the CERB. We know that we're 7 weeks into this now, but there's still a lot of questions out there, and things keep evolving as the gaps are identified. Just this morning, we found out for people that are expecting, that are on maternity, they were excluded from the CERB for EI, and so now that has been addressed. So things are always evolving. And we all saw how long it took for the CERB to, with all the changes and the adaptations, and now with the emergency wage subsidy, we know that that's going to be evolving and changing as well. And I'm really glad that Leon is here today, because he's going to be addressing a lot of your questions about the wage subsidy, because on our team, he's sort of the one that's taken the lead with that. So we're great to have Leon here today. presentations about the wage subsidy, which is sort of our first thing on the list here, about the programs we promote. The wage subsidy is handled by Canada Revenue Agency. Service Canada doesn't do that much for Canada Revenue Agency. They're sort of their own separate entity. We do work quite a bit with the outreach team for Canada Revenue Agency, and they will be doing the presentations about the wage subsidy. As soon as we know that is happening, we're going to forward that information on to Michael. And also we have a liaison from CRA identified, Wayne Wu, who will, I can send that contact information to you as well. As talking to him yesterday, and he will take questions. He's a small business liaison officer for CRA, and I'll give you that contact, and he welcomes questions from small businesses and chambers. So I'll send you that information as well. So with the wage subsidy, it's one of the main things we're promoting right now. As I said, it's still evolving. It's for employers, and you know, the wage subsidy, and Leon's going to address this later, it's the 75% of wages on the first 58,000 of salary, $847 a week for an employee. It's going to be backdated to March 15th. We know that there's a lot of concern with employees who have collected the CERB or EI. They will have to pay that back, but you know, the benefits for the employer is that they will be able to have this wage subsidy for employees that they've been able to keep, and also for employees that they've had to lay off and they can now bring back. And a benefit for the employees is that, you know, under the CERB, they're only able to make up to $1,000 a month, but under the wage subsidy, they can make whatever. So, you know, that's a benefit, but we can talk a little bit more about that later. Applications are through CRA. We also promote Canada Summer Jobs programs. They've increased the wage subsidy for the Canada Summer Jobs to 100%. They extended the application, and they've extended the employment date to February 28th, 2021. And you know, I hope that a lot of the businesses out there have taken advantage of the Summer Jobs program. It's a great program, and they've made changes to it this year as well. For individuals, the CERB, and that's what I'm going to be talking about mainly this morning, that $2,000 for 4 months for the workers. It's a benefit for workers. And there was also an enhancement to the child benefit, an additional $300 per child for those eligible for the child tax benefit, and that happened in May. For the GST credit, $400 for single adults, $600 for couples. The provincial emergency benefit, that application was just last week, and that was from the province, and anybody who had qualified and was paid or would be paid for a CERB, the emergency response benefit, were to apply for that $1,000. Also, there's deferral programs like tax filing, ICBC, BC Hydro, a bunch of different companies have deferral programs. So getting into employment insurance, with employment insurance, these are the benefits that are typically under EI, employment insurance. So temporarily unemployed, so anyone who has lost their job because of COVID is applying for a regular benefit. And so it's, you know, the government realizes that when you're on regular EI, you are usually supposed to be available for work, but we know with COVID, you are available, but there's no jobs. So anybody who's lost their job because of COVID is going on a regular EI. If somebody is in quarantine or they're sick with the COVID virus, then they're applying for the EI medical, which is 15 weeks. For maternity, we've just learned today that those are going to be addressed, and anybody on maternity, and I'm not sure of the details yet, it hasn't been all worked out, as one of those evolving things, will be eligible for the CERB. Up until now, anybody who's been on maternity, parental, or the caregiver or compassionate care, those claims haven't changed, and those claims are not paid, flipped over to the CERB. Anybody who is applying for the temporary unemployed, like the regular EI claim, they apply for EI, and then their claim is flipped over to the CERB. So they're being paid EI, CERB. So CERB through EI. And the special benefit claims haven't been flipped over. So we're just seeing now they've addressed the gap and maternities are being flipped over to CERB. For self-employed people, you can also access EI special benefits. So for maternity, parental, sickness, compassionate care, and family caregiver, you start paying EI premiums. You have to pay for a year. You register on your My Service Canada account, and then you could be eligible for the special benefits. So for a young person who is wants to start a family, they're self-employed, they can start paying into it. And then a year later or so, if they become pregnant, then they can collect their special benefits. Or maybe on the other end of the spectrum, you have aging parents, and it could be possible that you might have to apply for a family caregiver or compassionate care for a family member. You may want to start paying into EI, so you're eligible for those special benefits. For EI, usually for a medical claim, you need 600 hours for a special benefit claim. So for a sickness claim, it's based on the unemployment rate in the region, the hours needed to qualify. We're telling people not to screen yourself out of EI, apply on your last day of work, apply before 4 weeks after your last day of work. Don't wait for a record of employment, apply right away. For any claims after March 15th, they will pay the emergency response benefit first through the EI stream, $500 per week. They're not even calculating claims. Everybody gets the $500 per week for those first 16 weeks. And with EI regular claims, it's 700 hours to qualify, but if you don't have 700 hours, still apply, because with the unemployment rate going up, the number of hours you need to qualify for EI is going to start going down. So people who may not have enough hours to qualify for a regular claim could very well qualify shortly for a claim. If anybody is entitled to a family supplement, so if their net income is not exceeding this around $26,000, and if they receive a Canada Child benefit, then that family would get a family supplement. That is something that happens automatically. For reasons for separation, if an employee is sick or quarantined or told to quarantine, they're applying for an employment insurance medical claim. If the company is closed or shut down related to the coronavirus, it's shortage of work, they apply through EI and they get the CERB. If anyone quits their job, they may not be entitled to employment insurance or CERB. And if someone fails to return to a job requested by an employer, they could also lose their entitlement to the CERB unless there's mitigating circumstances. So say, for example, somebody has been laid off, they're collecting EI, they're collecting the emergency response benefit, they're asked to go back to work. And they feel that it's unsafe for them to do so, either because they're immunocompromised, maybe they have a family member that's immunocompromised, or maybe they're living with elderly parents, or they have children, or their spouse is expecting, their spouse is pregnant. So there's a whole bunch of different mitigating circumstances that could make it possible, and you could protect your benefits. For repayment of benefits, and this is normal for any employment insurance, if you're making over around $66,000, then next year, if you've collected EI this year, you could have to pay back at income tax time. And this is kind of normal. It doesn't apply if you've received less than 1 week of regular benefits in the last 10 years, or if you were paid special benefits. But if you're on regular benefits, then you could have to pay back. And I think it's around 30%. So with the COVID special measures, so these are measures as of March 15th, and they apply to any employment insurance claim filed after March 15th. So any Canadians that were placed in quarantine or sick with the COVID virus, the waiting period for those claims are going to be waived. You have to phone the EI sickness benefits phone number, the phone number that's on the screen. And I'm going to provide handouts and all the phone numbers and links later to Stephanie and Michael to forward to you. So with the EI medicals, no medical certificate is required, even for medical extensions at this time. If you do have to send any documents in for employment insurance, you send them to the Service Canada in Edmonton. And with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, so that's that benefit, it provides a taxable benefit of $2,000 a month up to 4 months for workers. And now it's also for self-employed small business. So these are the 4 main criterias. The first one, residing in Canada, people who are at least 15 years old. And this is the main one. This is the main criteria. You must have stopped working, or your business is less, or your business is closed because of COVID-19, or you're eligible for EI insurance regular benefits, and you have not voluntarily left your job. But this benefit is mainly for workers, and it's that criteria. Have you stopped working because of COVID-19? You must have had an income of at least $5,000 in 2019 or in the 12 months prior to the date of your application. This is also a big one, that $5,000. Sometimes if somebody is on LTD or they're like long-term disability, if they're on disability, this requirement precludes them from getting Canada Emergency Response Benefit. And even for seniors as well, because if a senior doesn't have an income, then, and if they haven't stopped work because of they're not working, then they would not be eligible for this. With seniors and people with disabilities, we're still sort of waiting for any announcements of emergency response benefits for those demographics, because we haven't really heard of anything so far. With that $5,000, it includes tips, non-eligible dividends, honoraria, royalties. If not eligible for employment insurance, it could also include the EI maternity or parental benefits. It does not include pensions, student loans, or bursaries. And we have more, we have another question that sort of applies to this a little bit later, strictly about for business that Leon's going to cover. And the other criteria is somebody who can expect to be without employment or self-employment income for at least 14 consecutive days in the initial 4-week period and for the subsequent benefit periods. And we're going to talk about that too, because that, you know, that $1,000 that you're allowed to make, what are you allowed to make, and what does it look like for somebody who is in a small business or has a business or self-employment income. So we're going to cover that too. Expanded benefits announced as of April 15th. It's now extended to seasonal workers who have exhausted their EI regular benefits and they're unable to undertake their regular seasonal work. And at first, a lot of the seasonal workers were excluded from the CERB. And so anybody who worked last summer, they were on EI for the winter and were going to go back to work, but COVID has prevented them from returning to their work. Their EI was exhausted and they had no income. They had nothing, you know, no options. And so the CERB was extended to seasonal workers. Also, essential workers who make less than $2,500. So this is essential workers like maybe care home people that are not working as much. Maybe their hours have gone from full-time to part-time. And if it's less than $2,500, they also qualify. And people who make less than $1,000 a month due to reduced work hours. And also it's extended to workers who have recently exhausted their EI regular benefits and they're unable to find a job due to COVID. With the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, if you're self-employed, you should apply for the CERB through CRA. and you can do that through their portal. It's answering 4 questions. It's very easy, or by telephone if you don't want to go through the portal. If you don't have a CRA My Account, you can do it by phone. If you have questions about whether you qualify or not for the CERB, you can call the helpline, and you can also call the agent, and I'll be forwarding these numbers later, and you can phone and talk to them and ask if, do I qualify? Right now they are approving just about every application or request for the CERB. CRA will be doing audits to see if people are eligible, and anyone who is not eligible will be asked to pay back the CERB. If you pay it back before December, then it won't. They won't issue T4s and or T5s or whatever they're going to be. It won't affect the taxes next year. So if you are work related, if you stopped working because of COVID, then you should be applying through the EI stream. And if you're part-time, less than 30 hours a week, worked at least 8 months, or if you're full-time, you should apply through the EI, and then you will be paid EI CERB for the first 16 weeks of your claim, and then it will, if you're still unemployed, then your EI claim will kick in. And there's a CERB helpline for Service Canada and CRA. There's lots of information about the CERB on the CRA website, and the question and answers for the CERB are fabulous on there. And now over to Leon for the questions.
Hello, good morning. The first question that we came up with was, how do I know whether to apply for EI benefits or the CERB? Basically, it's a series of short questions, which will, in effect, work to guide the person either to the Service Canada door or the Canada Revenue Agency door. Questions like, how often did you work in a month in terms of the number of hours? What was your estimated income, and so forth. Next slide. Another good question would be, what counts towards the $1,000 in income? So this would include both a person's employment and or self-employment income. And this can include tips, honoraria, and royalties. However, if we're looking at royalties for a moment, the focus is on for what time period were these royalties being paid? As well as Diane has mentioned previously, pensions, student loans, and bursaries are not considered employment income and therefore should not be included in the $1,000. As for businesses, there was a clarification Monday of this week, and the focus is now on what is the owner's pre-tax income once you've taken into account your expenses. These new guidelines also state that the business owners who rely on dividends are eligible, but these dividends must be considered as self-employment income provided it comes from non-eligible dividends, and specifically that these dividends are paid out of corporate income tax paid out at the small business rate. Next slide. In terms of if I am in receipt of dividends, am I eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit? Yes, so long as these non-eligible dividends, just like in the previous question, are being taxed at the corporate income tax rate for small businesses, and of course that the applicant meets the eligibility criteria. These same monies can also be used to count towards that minimum $5,000 that Diane mentioned as one of the eligibility criteria for the CERB. And as well, these monies can count towards the $1,000 per month income threshold for the benefit period. Next slide. With respect to royalties, we're looking at artist royalties that would be considered as self-employment income. So the person is receiving these monies because of a copyright, patent, trademark, or formula, or secret process. Similar to the dividends, those royalties can count both towards the $5,000 income threshold in 2019 or in the previous 12 months to be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. As well, these monies will be counted towards that $1,000 per month that an applicant is allowed to receive. And there's a final cautionary note. These royalty payments received from work that took place before the period when the person applies will not be counted towards the income for that period for which they may be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So if you know of someone who is receiving this benefit, please remind them that they should not mention those monies. And as well, if the royalties are coming from investment activities, they do not count as well with respect to the benefit. Next slide. Are self-employed small business owners eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit? Yes, so long as the applicant meets the eligibility criteria, including that they have stopped work due to COVID-19 and they are not earning more than $1,000 in a period of at least 14 consecutive days in that first period. So a reminder, that first period started mid-month from March 15th to the end of the month. And for subsequent claim periods, that they are not exceeding that $1,000 per month for the entire 4-week subsequent. So after April 12th or after May 10th, those are the subsequent claim periods. What small business owners can receive income from their businesses in different ways. So they may be receiving a salary, they may receive business income or dividends. When determining the eligibility for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, we're going to be taking a look at, does the owner take a salary from their business? Does the owner rely on business income so they should consider their net pre-tax income, just like I mentioned a few slides ago. And finally, owners who rely on dividend income, they should consider this as self-employed income, provided it comes from the non-eligible dividends. And the clue there is, are these monies being paid and taxed at that small business rate? Next slide. So this question has to do with, can someone qualify for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit if they still have a small amount of income coming into their business as a sole proprietor to pay for ongoing business expenses? And this could include their rent, their utilities, and other bills, so long as they're not paying themselves an income. And the answer to this would be yes. The person would be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. They must have stopped working as a result of the reasons related to COVID-19, and they cannot be receiving more than $1,000 in either employment or self-employment income for at least 14 consecutive days in that initial 4-week period for which they apply. And then for subsequent periods, the maximum amount of income allowed would be $1,000 in employment or self-employment income for that entire 4-week period.
And so these are some of the numbers that we had, and now we can open it up to any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was very informative. I will note a couple things in that Diane and I think Leon both mentioned things are changing as of Monday. Something changed. It is an ongoing process. There's lots of stuff changing all the time. I'm on a call with Ottawa every morning, and we talk about things that are coming up and are being considered. So just, you need to stay tuned because things are changing. And on this, in this file, Diane is very good at getting us stuff very quickly. We post it up on the website, and we send it out in our emails. So Diane's been great in getting us updated information on this file. Thank you very much for that. But things are changing, they are adjusting, and they are trying to fill in the gaps. From everything I'm hearing from back in Ottawa, they are trying to fill the gaps as best as they can. So as soon as we know, you'll know. Let's get some questions here. First question is from, okay, where do we get dollars paid? Where do we get the dollars paid to staff on a work share program that needs to be deducted from our CEWS application? Do we know that one?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Where do we get the dollars paid to staff on the work share program that needs to be deducted from our wage subsidy application? Not sure I understand that one. Do you guys?
Yeah. And with the wage subsidy, that is going through Canada Revenue Agency.
Yeah.
And I think it's, it's just sort of like we saw with the CERB. We get the announcement in Ottawa, and Michael, you sort of alluded to this too. Like we get the announcement from Ottawa, and then it sort of all rolls downhill. And so it's going to be by, it's going to be remittance, and it'll be through CRA. The funding. So, it's probably going to be like a portal through a CRA account, and it's to be determined, to be announced.
Steph, do you want to flag that one and we'll follow up on that one in separate channels? No worries. Thanks for that. Okay. Bonnie asks if employees currently on CERB are rehired and there's only enough work for them for a month or two, can they go off CERB, and can they go back on CERB after a 1 or 2 month period?
Yes,
so they're on
they
CERB, they come back for a little short time, not enough work, gotta go, can they go back on CERB?
Yeah, it would be just like so they're work related, so they would be reporting on their EI that they found full-time work, that they're back to work. That's the best way to do it. And then they would return to work. If at a later date they're laid off again, they would renew that EI claim, and then they would be paid the remaining CERB CERB if they qualified. Yeah.
Okay, Bonnie, I hope that answers your question, Bonnie. Danielle is asking, some people have been paid both EI and CERB. Will they have to pay back one or the other?
Absolutely. Yeah, if anybody is sort of double dipping, absolutely. Because when you're applying for EI right now, it is paying you EI CERB, EI CERB. And so if you're applying through EI and CRA, you're receiving double the benefits, and CRA will ask you to repay what they have paid you. As of April 12th, they actually have put in a stop so that if anybody is on EI CERB, they will not be able to apply for the CERB through CRA now. But that was only as of April 12th. So unfortunately, anybody who applied through both will get that request from CRB to or CRA to pay back.
Yeah, and I think initially in the program they were trying to get the money in people's hands as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Did a good job knowing that, hoping people would A, goodwill, not take both or take advantage of it, and B, knowing that there would be an audit process down the road and catch up with everybody down the road. So initially, just get money in people's hands and we'll get you later, and that's what's going to happen. So should pay it back before they catch up with you.
Yeah.
Next one, Joanne asking, due to the change of EI to CERB, what happens if an employee does not qualify for the wage subsidy, but wanted to do the sub plan that EI has access to? Not quite sure about that one. Due to the change of EI to CERB, what happens if an employee does not qualify for the wage subsidy, but want to do the sub plan that EI has access to? Does that make sense?
No, I'm not sure. Leon?
I think we need to break it down so it's the employer applying for the wage subsidy, not the employee. Yeah. If the employee is not eligible for employment insurance, but they still meet the eligibility requirements for CERB, I don't see why they would not be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, bearing in mind that the Canada Emergency Response Benefit has a maximum of 60 weeks. My understanding is for those who qualify for the emergency response for EI, if after 16 weeks there is still no work or little work, then that CERB would come to an end, and if approved for EI, that's when the EI weeks would kick in.
Okay. And I would think that, again, this is a fluid situation. And as things go on, the government gave us the window of 3 or 4 months here. If things, depending on how things go, you could see more changes down the road. So, but that's the way it stands currently. So good to know. And I guess that dovetails in the next question. Victoria's asking, how many weeks of EI will employees be covered for in Greater Vancouver how many weeks of EI will employees be covered for in Greater Vancouver?
So if we're using simply the reference point of 700 hours, I believe before the COVID-19 situation, 700 hours would potentially give that person 14 weeks. And if the person was working close to full time in the previous 12 months, they would be eligible for up to 34 weeks. But as Diane mentioned, the EI hours are seasonally adjusted. And so the next period for when they announce the hours for Greater Vancouver will be happening in the next week or so. So it remains to be seen whether those hours would be adjusted.
Okay. I didn't realize the
In other words,
sorry, go ahead.
less hours.
Yeah, I didn't realize the hours were tied to the
No, I'm
unemployment
done.
rate. That's news to me. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Is this
Yes.
PowerPoint going to be saved? Yeah, it'll be saved, right, Steph? This is all being saved, right, Steph? That's nodding approval. Joanne's asking if the business was not incorporated and the employer applied for and is receiving CERB, are they still allowed to apply for the wage subsidy without losing the CERB to themselves?
So again, if you are collecting one benefit, or like if you apply for the wage subsidy, then you would not be entitled to the CERB. They're total, as Leon said, they're totally separate entities. And if the employer applies for a wage subsidy and they are bringing back an employee who had been laid off, applied for EI, is getting the EI CERB, then that employee would have to pay back the CERB they got because they would be covered by the wage subsidy.
You can't do both.
You can't do both, no.
What percentage of tax is charged on EI CERB?
So that's a good question. It really depends upon what will your final income be by end of 2020. I can simply say this, that anybody currently receiving employment insurance, they're already having a minimum of tax taken off, perhaps 10%, whereas the Canada Emergency Response, unfortunately, no tax has been taken off at the present time. So people really have to be disciplined enough to set aside enough money to ensure that they have an adequate amount at tax time. That's all we can really see at this time. So my best clue is if a person thinks they're going to be in their 20% tax bracket by end of the year, then they need to make sure that they have sufficient amount of money for that 20% tax bracket.
Yeah, plan ahead. So Pat's asking, if I have claimed the $40,000 interest-free loan, can I still apply employees for the 75% subsidy? Yes, you can do the loan. I believe you can do the loan and the wage subsidy, right?
Yeah, and I'm not clear about the loan. Leon, do you have any insight with that?
I don't understand I don't have information in terms of the relationship between the two. So one good source of information would be Canada.ca, and looking at keywords, the business loan, also the number that Diane provided, the 1-800-959-2018 number. That's a toll-free number for Canada Revenue Agency, and that would be a good source of information as well, because I believe both of those programs are being administered by CRA, so I would defer to them as to the consequences of trying to access both.
Okay, I believe you can do, don't hold me to it, you can get both. I know people are doing it, because you got to pay back most of the loan. So yeah, so I think you can do both.
The important thing would be paying back, I believe, by end of December next year, if one is hoping to have that $10,000 forgiven.
Correct. So I think you can do both, but again, best to check, and we will get more clarification on that coming forward. So another one, I'm the only employee in my company, and my business has lost at least 80–90%. Which benefits should I apply for? CERB as an employee or the wage subsidy as a business?
Well, the wage subsidy is for employers to be able to pay employees. So if you are the only person working in your business, then you would qualify for the emergency response benefit.
And she's asking which one should I apply for? Because if she's an employee, she might be able to get the wage subsidy. I guess you've got to do the math on that one. First off, determine whether you qualify for the wage subsidy and then do the math.
Mm.
I would think.
Well,
Okay,
as Diane said, I mean, just to follow up, if there's only the one person, then by definition, my understanding is they would not be eligible for the wage subsidy
there you go.
because they are essentially working for themselves or self-employed. Therefore, the only avenue would be the Canada Emergency Response Benefit.
Okay, there, that clarifies it. Beautiful, thank you. Where are we going next? Thanks for the updates. Okay, Diana is asking, what would happen if an employee who is currently collecting CERB and decide to tender their resignation before they have an opportunity to be called back? What would happen if an employee who is currently collecting CERB decides to tender their resignation before they've been called back?
Well, I think the first step is they need to contact Canada Revenue. First of all, which portal did they access these monies from? Did they apply through the EI door or did they apply through the CRA door? Whichever way they chose, they need to notify, be it Service Canada or Canada Revenue Agency, because basically it's a voluntary quit. And if it is a voluntary quit, then they are not eligible for Canada Emergency Response Benefit.
Or EI benefits, and unless there's mitigating circumstances. Like I said before, if they're immunocompromised and they don't want to come back to work because of they think there's a danger, or they're, you know, they have young children, a spouse pregnant, you know, mitigating circumstances. Anybody who voluntarily leaves their job could, like Leon said, be ineligible for EI benefits or the CERB.
Okay, keep trucking along here. And if an employee is collecting CERB but comes back to work part-time, can the employer claim the 75% wage subsidy? If an employee is collecting CERB but comes back to work part-time, and I'm assuming they're still collecting CERB then, but they haven't reached the $1,000 threshold, can the employer claim the 75% wage subsidy?
I think it comes down to one or the other. So by definition, if the person is hired retroactive, that means that the employee is no longer eligible for Canada Emergency Response Benefit. They must return those monies, and the subsidy would be based on the amount that the employer receives from that employer. So it's like a two-part thing. The employee has roles and responsibilities. Upon returning to work, the employer must notify whoever they're getting the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that they have returned to work. And then the wage subsidy depends upon the amount of income up to that cap of $847 per week, based on the yearly maximum pensionable earnings of roughly $58,000 per annum. And with the expectation, of course, the employer is making best efforts to cover that remaining 25% if they are able.
Okay, Joanne's following up here. I think EI used to have a plan that you could top up wages with a sub plan, but due to EI moving to CERB, what happens with the sub plan? So was there a sub plan before?
Yes, there was. So it could have been in the case of employees perhaps wanting to go on a maternity parental leave. And so if the employer was participating and paying a little bit more, willing to pay a little bit more to the employee above and beyond what EI would be paid, there was a change in the rate the employer had to pay for employment insurance. But because of the COVID-19 situation, things being so new, I think it would be better that the employer speak directly, for example, to the employer contact center to get more current information as to what implications or what is the impact on these sub-plans given the COVID-19 situation.
Okay. If an employee is on CERB coming back for 1 or 2 or 3 days, does the employer have to do up an ROE every time they come back for such short times? They are paid less than $1,000 and will affect their claim.
No, they don't. The claims are already established. People are already collecting the CERB. The only time they would have to issue another record of employment is if the employee quit and they had to pay out benefits. So they don't.
Okay, The next question is to do with the wage subsidy, so I'm going to pass over that one right now because I think they were going to focus on CERB and stuff right now, because we'll get more details on that one shortly.
Yeah.
If employees are collecting CERB, they are not going to come back and work part-time if they have to pay back a portion of CERB because the employer is collecting the 75%. So the employer has to forego the 75%. Is this correct?
Well, not necessarily. With the CERB, we know that because they're paying that flat rate of $500 a week, for some employees, that's more than what they usually earn. And so we get that question a lot. Well, you know, why would I go back to work, or do I have to go back to work when I'm making less money on the CERB? Well, if they're making under $1,000, they still get to collect the CERB. But under the wage subsidy, if an employer offers an employee the wage subsidy, the employee should know that if you're collecting CERB, it's the $2,000 flat rate. You have to make under $1,000. But if you are called back to work, there's no restriction in how much you can make. You're not restricted to that $1,000. So there is a benefit for the employers and the employees.
Okay. How many hours would an employee need to lose due to COVID-19 to still be eligible for EI/CERB?
It's that $1,000. It's very clear when they apply that that's one of those criteria, one of the 4 main criteria.
Okay, a couple more here, and I think we're just about done. And just a clarification for Gabriel here. What would happen if I am paying a limited amount of salary, less than $1,000 a month? I am paying a limited amount of salary. Would they still be able to collect CERB if I applied for the wage subsidy for that individual? Or would my applying for the wage subsidy disqualify the individual from CERB?
That is my understanding. The very fact of applying for the wage subsidy, because of its retroactive nature, would result in the CERB having to be paid back.
Okay.
I would add that there are 2 wage subsidies. There is the wage subsidy at 75%, but there, to the best of my knowledge, the wage subsidy at 10% still exists. So for those periods where a company may not be eligible for the 75%, they should look into what is the eligibility for the 10% wage subsidy.
Correct. There is the 10% is still there. Okay, and Diana, following up her question about the ROE, with regard to my previous question regarding an employee collecting CERB and resigning prior to being called back to work, do I provide another ROE stating that they have quit their job, keeping in mind that I have already provided an ROE for shortage of work due to COVID? Do they have to do another ROE?
Well, usually you would, because you probably, if someone resigns, are paying out vacation pay or severance pay or different things like that. So it's important to indicate that. But if you have any questions about how to fill out a record of employment, in the slides, there was that employer contact center. And that's exactly who you would call to ask all of your questions about records of employment. They're the ones that are there to advise you about whether or not you have to fill in records of employment.
Especially if there's no additional insurable hours. Again, I think just like Diane said, it's important to follow up with the employer contact center to verify whether either a new record has to be issued, but if there's no insurable hours, then the supplementary question is, does an amended record of employment have to be issued?
Okay, we've got one last question here. It's about the wage subsidy. I'll ask it anyways. You may not be in a position to answer this. I think I know the answer, but the notes at the beginning stated that companies must show a 30% reduction in April and May for the wage subsidy, 15% in March. When we read up on this, it said that if we qualified for March, then the companies automatically qualify for April without needing to prove the 30% reduction in revenue in April. But do we need to still prove a 30% reduction in May? Does this hold true? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, I can say that there's 3 successive periods of 4 weeks each. So it's a maximum of 12 weeks. And my impression is they would have to apply for every claim period after the fact. So the initial period was from March 15 to April 11. So the employer has to essentially prove, it's a way to check for accountability. My impression is the employer has to prove that they, yes, indeed, have paid those monies to the employees before they receive the subsidy. And then my impression is then that from April 12 to 4 weeks after that, that's that new claim period. So the second, the employer would send a request after the conclusion of that second claim period. And then you have a third claim period, which would run from basically middle of April through, middle of May through early June. Again, the employer, it is my understanding, they would have to send again proof that they did pay the employees the monies to be eligible for the wage subsidy. So on my reading it, and I certainly invite the person to go on to canada.ca and type in the keywords Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and there's a good section on frequently asked questions, but also to speak directly to Canada Revenue Agency to just confirm what I've said. But it's my understanding that there are 3 separate claim periods. The first claim period, you have to demonstrate a drop of 15%, either by referencing the similar period in 2019, or for those few companies that have maybe just started up earlier this year. I do believe there's an averaging formula for either January or February, but please look at the details. I hope that gets close to what the person was asking for.
Yeah, I think, and the understanding, and we'll get Revenue Canada on here too, as Diane talked about. I think the wage subsidy is a whole different ballgame. We got to deal with that pretty quickly. My understanding is if you're eligible for March subsidy, you're automatically eligible for April. They may come back and want to verify that, but you don't have to apply again, but you do have to apply again for the third period. Is what I think is my understanding. We've been told. So if you apply for March's wage subsidy, you automatically get the second period, but you have to apply for the third again, and they will come back and check on your subsidy. But don't take me to the bank on that one. But that's what I've been told. And we will get CRA on here soon to talk about that. That's the best way to do it. So
we'll send you. I sent you those infographics on how it's calculated. The CRA has a calculator online, and also they're saying that to do the remittance, you're just submitting your normal deducting income tax and other remunerations, and then the subsidies calculated when you remit these amounts to CRA. So that was sort of the initial guidance that we got.
Okay, and here's the last question. I'm going to try to make it a quick one. Can an employer who is self-employed continue to receive CERB for themselves as well as the wage subsidy for their employees?
So probably not. Like that's sort of one of those gaps that are going to be addressed, but probably not, because I mean, the employees are not allowed to, have both, and probably the employer will not either. They'd have to pay it back. Good question for CRA.
Yeah, and nobody's trying to duck your questions. There's just a lot of gaps. This has come out very quickly. I think Diane and Leon have done a fantastic job answering your questions today, and we thank you for that. If you do have further questions, the phone numbers are up there. We're going to keep them posted. We will post them. I know they've really amped in both Service Canada and CRA. They've upped the number of staff answering the phone calls, and they monitor the waiting time very closely. I think a couple of days ago it was like 2 minutes you have to wait, or a minute you have to wait to get to somebody. So we're trying to provide you some information here. If you need further information, we will try to get it for you, or call directly to those numbers is your best bet, and talk to somebody directly. Things are changing all the time. We will get you updates. Diane's been fantastic at sending us stuff, and we will continue to push that out through the network as we get it. We will get CRA. We'll talk to Diane's contact there and try to get them on here to talk about the wage subsidy. Thank you very much, both of you. That was very informative. I think people really got a lot out of it, and it's great. Thank you very much, and keep up the great work under these really difficult circumstances. I think the civil service has really stepped up. And like I said earlier, the politicians will make the announcements, and then it's up to you guys to deliver them and execute them. And there are gaps. They're being identified. They're being worked on, and we will keep pushing the politicians to get the gaps filled. So thank you very much. We appreciate Diane and Leon. Have a great time, great week, and everybody check back for the updates. Premier Horgan's speaking today, so I'm sure we'll have an update coming up about that shortly later on this afternoon. Have a great week, and check back with us if you need anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.